Hello, insiders, and welcome to our fourth episode of Spilling the Beans, Coffee and Conversations with Patient Advocates. I'm Sarah. I'm a moderator with Summer Consulting, the parent company of the Insiders. Today we have patient advocates Ella Balasa and Aaron Blocker joining us to talk about how patients can drive progress in research. Ella and Aaron, if you wouldn't mind, just please introduce us and let us know a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Aaron Blocker. I'm from Mississippi, and I actually live with two diseases. So one is Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease, which is more common than the other disease that I have called hypophosphatasia, which is an ultra-rare genetic metabolic bone disease. And so I was diagnosed with Crohn's in 2009, and then I was diagnosed with hypophosphatasia in 2017. And so it's been quite a long time for the Crohn's disease and the rare disease diagnosis. I have been advocating online since 2010, really. So I started with the Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease work back in 2010, shortly after my diagnosis, and then switched to incorporating some rare disease advocacy after my rare disease diagnosis. You can find me online. It's my first name, Aaron Blocker _. And for Crohn's disease, it's support for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis on Facebook. And I have coffee in my mug that I've been drinking.
Hi everyone, I'm Ella Balasa and I am a patient advocate living with cystic fibrosis, which is a rare genetic lung disease. I was diagnosed at 18 months old, so I've been living with this condition and knowing about this condition for most of my life. And basically it causes infections in the lungs, and these infections require constant use of antibiotics to treat them. And over time, this cycle of infection and inflammation reduces the function of the lungs and eventually leads to respiratory decline and respiratory failure. And people with CF often have to get lung transplants at some point in their lives to prolong life. I have been advocating for the past, I'd say 7 to 8 years. And really I started with volunteering in various capacities with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, contributing patient perspectives to various different research committees. And from there, it sort of has expanded, and really I have seen the value that I have in bridging the gaps between patient communities and researchers, and more broadly, the healthcare industry. So I also really advocate for patient empowerment, for us to be our own best advocates and gain knowledge about our care and about health and about research opportunities as well. So I have Instagram, which is Ella Balasa Advocacy is my handle. Also on X, which is Ella Balasa 1. And those are, I'd say, my primary channels. I'm trying to dabble into TikTok, but social media creation is challenging. It's hard to get audiences and share that message. And so for what I'm drinking, I have hot tea, and this is a coconut cream jasmine tea. So it's very tasty. Look forward to this conversation.
As we get started, we do want to note that nothing said here today is medical advice and should not be considered medical advice. We are not promoting any products or any manufacturers. And a reminder for everyone joining us to always ask your physician before trying anything new. So let's start talking a little bit about your experiences in research. Aaron, what types of research have you participated in, and how and why did you initially get involved in them?
Yeah, so I've never been in like a drug trial, but I have been and am currently in some longitudinal clinical studies and some other clinical studies that are really to just look at how my disease is changing over time. And I've actually had that with my rare disease, especially. They do a ton of different data collection and just long-term studies on my disease because it's so rare. And so I've also done like market research as well. So I've been a part of that. And I think that, for me, especially living with a rare disease, I think being able to get into any kind of clinical research is really important, because one, with rare diseases especially, there's not a lot of patients with that disease. So as much information as I think that I can contribute to it not only helps me, but helps everybody else. And so a lot of that with the clinical stuff that I do with my rare disease, I see a physician at a hospital that does a ton of research. And so they asked me if I wanted to contribute to these studies. And I said, yes, of course, that we talked about it. And then a lot of the kind of market research that I'm part of is just being involved with groups, obviously like the insiders and others that do a lot of that market insight research. Yeah, I've been doing it for a while, and I really enjoyed being part of it and being able to share different aspects of that and different data points and trying to just help everybody learn a little bit more about the conditions that I live with and that others live with as well.
How about you, Ella?
Like Aaron, I have not participated in a traditional like investigational drug trial. I have, however, participated in observational studies, kind of understanding, the different aspects of living with cystic fibrosis for various research groups, and, for them to gain better insight about, different, aspects that aren't really researched when it's primarily a lung disease, but it also affects the gut, the sinuses. There's some reproductive health consequences or issues as well. So I've participated in some of these types of things that have been collecting like patient-reported outcome measures and things. And I've also participated in like phase 4 trials, which is actually a post-market. Those were specifically device trials and understanding, how these certain devices, medical devices, are being used and how effective they are for patients after their release on the market. It was to support breathing at different like lung volumes to strengthen lungs and be able to move the mucus out of the lungs, which is really important for CF. In addition to this type of research, I've also had the opportunity to try an experimental treatment, and this was something that isn't FDA approved. I was one of the first few people actually in the US to have this type of treatment. It was called phage therapy, and it's basically like an alternative to traditional antibiotics to try to minimize and treat the infections that grow in the lungs. And so this was done, it was like an N of 1, so it was like I was the only person in this study, and it was through compassionate use, which is like an FDA approval, quick approval for a patient to get a non-approved therapeutic. And so this experience really made me realize the importance of, people with conditions to advocate for and gain as much knowledge and understanding about different research opportunities that exist. Because if I wouldn't have been as strong of an advocate for myself to get that treatment, I certainly wouldn't have. And that's something that I've shared about really publicly and broadly and advocate for other patients to take that ownership and empower themselves. And so through these different channels, as I said, and I've also participated in market research opportunities too. And that's subsequent to this, as I said, to this experience with this phage therapy, I realized that I really wanted to be this voice for patients in the research space. And so that's when I started to write more blogs and share on social media and really be this advocate and encourage others to get involved in research, because it's really important to raise our voices. Our voices have incredible power, our voices and our bodies. So I know we'll talk about that a little bit more, but just to give an introduction.
Oh, that's great. We're going to have a wonderful conversation today. Let's start a little bit on the basics of research, kind of the research 101, if you will. We asked some insiders to submit some questions about participating in the research. Aaron, so I have a question for you. Some people think that healthcare research is only clinical trials. At the insiders, we do insights or market research, as you mentioned, that you've been involved in. Can you explain a little bit more about how those are different?
Yeah, so a clinical trial is like you said, is usually what people think that like research and stuff is where you're gonna go in, and typically a lot of these clinical trials are drug trials. You're gonna go, try be in a trial for a drug where they're gonna test the safety of it, how effective it is, and you're actually gonna get the drug or potentially placebo depending on. But clinical research is research trials or trials looking at some sort of clinical outcome, and oftentimes it is like a drug. And the difference in like market research or insights research is where you kind of as a patient or sometimes caregiver are going to give your experience with whatever the topic may be. For instance, there are things like insights market research on things that drug companies are going to send out to patients or advertisements, whether sometimes I've done market research for commercials that are going to come out for drugs. I've done market research for experiences using auto injectors or infusion experiences. So it really is your own lived experience with whatever topic they're looking at. And so, again, it can be a range of things, but it's being able to give kind of your experience. Sometimes this is done in groups. You may have like a group session, like a patient-focused group session where you all talk and give your experiences about whatever that topic may be. But it really gives you the opportunity to share your own experience with an important topic about your health, something that you've actually experienced, which is really cool. It gives you the opportunity to give feedback, oftentimes to say like drug companies, manufacturers, on something that you've used or you've experienced, so that they can take your lived experience back and try to make the product better, or also make just the way that they do things better. But it's a really cool way to hopefully to share your experience and then have them take that back and hopefully make something better, whether that's, a different kind of injection, whether that's a different kind of auto injector, something about, say, like an infusion that you didn't like, or something about something that you received in the mail about the drug that you didn't understand. It's a really cool way to have them know, to give their firsthand experience of, hey, look, this worked, this didn't work, this is what y'all can do to make it better. So that's a really cool thing about market research. And also, it's not clinical trial or anything like that. You're not having to take a drug or try something like that. It's something a little bit after the fact, kind of your lived experience with whatever the health topic may be. So it's a really cool way to contribute to research without having to go into like a clinical trial.
Ella, you talked a lot about some different types of research that you've been a part of, even some unique experiences where you were the N of one, or doing the compassionate use. One insider had asked us what patients or their caregivers should really be mindful of before they contribute to research. And this could be either trials or market research.
I think it's really important to make sure that you're aware of and understand exactly what this research is going to entail, what they're actually seeking from you, what data and what information are they collecting, how much time is it going to take from you. These are all things that obviously, not just our time is valuable, but our patient data is, ours, and it's very valuable. And so make sure that you are understanding of, whether that is participating in, as I said before, like in a clinical research opportunity, or whether it is, in market research and they're collecting your insights. Our insights and our bodies and our data is really valuable. And so we want to make sure that this is going to a safe place where this data is going to be safely stored and used for the purpose that they're stating that it is going to be. So, to kind of go back briefly to my experience with the experimental treatment, why I spoke to those researchers at Yale University. I contacted them directly. I spoke to them directly. I asked a lot of questions about what it's, all about what this treatment is going to entail, what can I expect. Obviously, when it comes to clinical research, there are unknowns, but that being said, it really needed that for me to be able to understand fully of what I'm going to be embarking on and what I'm getting involved in. When it comes to market research, again, it's really important to provide this kind of insights through companies that are reputable, like the insiders. They have established platform. There is a way to get paid for those insights, because that's also really, really important. As I said, our experiences have value. So, those are some things to be mindful of. And then, I would just say that when you are contributing, really be candid, because I think that, and maybe this kind of will addressing a next question already a little bit, but as I said, like our experiences are what's going to help move research forward. And so being as authentic and candid and really open with how we feel about something, whether that is concerns or whether that is positive things, I think that can only help both the conversation and the understanding that we have and the research itself that we're actually contributing to.
Erin, I have another question for you too, especially more toward the market research kind of thing and consent. I'm curious about what you should look for when you're reviewing any consent forms from market research or research groups. Specifically, do you look for things about data? Do you look about transactional payments, things like that? Or what's on your mind when you're looking through a consent form?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I do try to look for more of the, the data aspect of it, what's happening with this information that I'm giving. I want to ensure that, number one, it's going back to who they say it is, that it's not going to be shared outside of kind of what the terms are. And those terms should be in that consent form, the things about where your data should go, what's going to happen with your data, what happens, things that you say. And a lot of times they'll say things like, if you have any, talk about any adverse reactions, this is what we're going to do. And we may have to come back to you for certain things. And And, for market research, it's a lot of for me, it's really about kind of the data aspect of it. And I want to make sure that my data is secure, that they're not, that there's nothing in there about my data is about to be sold to like the highest bidder kind of thing. You know what I mean? And two, and if that's not in there, I will often come back and ask like, hey, what's going to happen with this after the fact? What are y'all doing with this? But it should be in that consent form. So for me, specifically, I do want to just make sure that it's all in there, that everything is, and as Ella said, the information that we give, the data that we provide is very valuable. And sometimes, it's kind of personal information sometimes and things like that. So you just want to make sure that, that is going to be housed in a safe way and transmitted in a safe way. A lot of times these things are kind of blind on the other end where they don't know your name or see your face or anything like that. So it's really just informational. And they should also tell you that, like tell you whether or not, your name would be shared or anything, and you would consent to that as well. So you just want to make sure that everything makes sense to you. Number one, make sure you read through it, of course, and make sure that it makes sense and ask questions about it if it doesn't make sense. But again, just make sure that, that everything seems like they're going to be doing the right thing with your data and it's going to the people that they say it is, so that it's not, just transmitted to multiple different people for, different things. But yeah, I think that it's extremely important to make sure that that information that we're giving is safe as it can be, because it's valuable. It really is. And I don't think people understand how valuable that insight is, especially in market research. That insight is very valuable to companies, and that's why they do it, and that's why they pay you for it. So you just want to make sure that they're doing what they say they're going to do with your data.
Those are all excellent points for both of you. Thank you. Another insider asked a question I'd like to get both of your perspectives on. How does patient involvement improve the quality of research? And ultimately, how does it help the participant as well in the long run?
Both Aaron and I touched on this a little bit already. I think that when those of us living with lived experience with various conditions, and we contribute these authentic thoughts, and whether they're positive or negative experiences with a product, with a service, as part of getting a treatment, they're really helping to create better solutions for people in the future. So whether, that is a pharmaceutical company trying to improve the way that they're communicating about a certain treatment with patients, whether that is a pharmacy that's trying to understand or better have better streamlined care and communications with patients that take certain drugs. All of these things will just make it easier for people living with conditions to access and participate in care and research and have better treatment options in the future. So, I'd say that's a pretty broad statement there, but it really, it can't be understated how valuable it is for us to give our perspectives. Well, first be asked for our perspectives, right? And then be able to give this, unfiltered insight.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Ella. We're on obviously the same page, and I think that, as she said, it cannot be understated, how important and how valuable that is. I mean, I think patient involvement, especially in like a market research thing. I mean, you're going in and you're telling them what you like about something, what you don't like, what they can do better, and they're going to take that information, and they're going to do their best to improve on it. And while those improvements, depending on what they are, can take some time, they can help not only you in the long run, it can benefit you in different ways. And I think an example of that I've tried to share with people is that, there's a drug, a medication that I'm on. It's a lot of injections. It can be painful sometimes, it's multiple injections, stuff like that. And the company did kind of a market research thing where they went in and talked to a bunch of patients about the treatment. And one of the biggest complaints was that it's a lot of shots and they're painful. So what the company has done is they piggybacked and pivoted to create something to make it less injections and to make it less painful. And that's something that they are trying to work. It's going to go through more clinical trials and things like that, because it is technically going to be a new drug. But they have tweaked it enough to where it can be where it is. It's less injections and less painful. And they took that information from the actual patients that had been on the drug for quite some time. And those were the two biggest complaints that patients had. And they did kind of a patient-focused thing and some market research, took all of that information back and came up with a solution. And they were able to come up with something that is going to really help patients in the long run. It'll help me, but it'll also help especially kids who have to do a lot of injections, children and things like that. So all of that information that they were able to gather from patients was something that they were able to use and really create something that is going to benefit a lot more people and help a lot of patients. So it's really important and it's really valuable information. And again, like as Ella said before, to be open and honest with them, as honest as you possibly can. It can be weird sometimes being honest and say, hey, look, this is say like a great drug, but it hurts and it's painful and I hate it. You know, it's given me certain things, but it is not fun to do. And that can be weird sometimes, telling people who have created a drug that helps you so much that you don't really like it, even though it's good. But it's very important because they can then take that information and hopefully use it to help not only you, but other patients who are using the same thing, and then patients in the future who may be on it.
Some insiders also wanted to know a little bit more about advancing and amplifying research as patients themselves. Ella, what do you think that the role of social media plays in advancing patient advocacy and awareness of research progress?
I think social media is a fantastic tool to be able to connect communities. Obviously, in the rare disease space, like there are very few people living with conditions, and really to access these individuals, social media is a primary way by which to connect people and to help facilitate this awareness and community building and advocacy efforts. So I think that from a patient community standpoint, a lot of advocacy organizations harness social media to, develop awareness campaigns, and whether that's for legislative advocacy or, various other means, or even just bringing awareness to the importance, as we talked about here, the importance of participating in research. And I think that when it comes to also sharing about opportunities for participation itself, social media is a phenomenal tool for that, because really without it, it's social media is something that nearly everybody has, right? Like when TikTok shut down, I think almost everybody I knew was having a meltdown. And that's just because we're so connected through social media. And it's such a great channel by which to spread awareness, spread information. And so, having these opportunities for research participation come to you through social media as a patient or an advocate is incredibly valuable, both for you as somebody giving out their insight and information, as well as for market research companies and, healthcare companies alike, and who are gathering this information. So, it's a great way to make progress, with all of these stakeholders together.
That's such great insight, and it plays right into my next question, which is that both of you are rare disease patient advocates, and I'm curious from your perspective, from not only the social media, but in a broader sense too. One insider wants to know how you ensure that the voices of patients with less common conditions are heard and they're considered in the broader healthcare research initiative. So maybe not so much on the social media for other patients, but how do they get their voices amplified within the system?
It can be hard, and living with the rare disease just feels isolating in many ways, right? I mean, it's rare, and some diseases are classified as ultra rare, and some people are one of 20 in the entire world with some sort of disease or condition. And so it can be hard and feel like that patients with these rare conditions are not included in the broader healthcare kind of research spectrum. And I think that it still ties into a lot of social media. Number one, I think that especially in rare diseases, being active kind of on social media and within these different kind of groups is really important, because number one, in rare, you can typically find a lot of patients online, whether that is not necessarily being advocates, but kind of in different kind of groups and things like that. And that is one way that companies, as Ella said, can kind of harvest that information to get you in. But I also think that it's important for rare disease patients to know that there are other ways to kind of get yourself kind of in the system. And I think that one is a lot of these things like market research there are a lot of topics that are broad enough that the rare disease patients can get into and get involved with. There are topics that go to a lot of different communities, a lot of different aspects of health, but rare diseases can still get their insights in. And you can still get that information in, and that also helps. But I also think that just being vocal and being active, and sometimes for rare, unfortunately, rare disease patients know that a lot of times the patient has to kind of put themselves out there and do research for certain things. But there are good initiatives kind of here in the US. There's good initiatives that like the NIH and the FDA that are specific to rare. And you can look at those resources and see what you can do to try to get involved. I mean, they take public comments, and I think that it's just you have to be a little proactive in the rare disease space sometimes to ensure that we are heard, that our voices are heard. And while your disease is rare, the rare diseases as a whole are not as rare. Their diseases are fairly common. There's over 30 million patients in the United States with rare diseases. So collectively as a whole, if we as a rare disease community can just continually push for change and continually try to make our voices heard, it not only helps just our specific rare disease, but it helps the rare disease community as a whole, because it continues to push to ensure that rare diseases are being considered in all of these different healthcare initiatives. Even though there's only 30 million rare disease patients in the world, I mean, the cost of rare diseases in the country is, I think, close to $200 billion a year in medical just from rare diseases. So while we can be a small population, we make up a big part of the healthcare and the healthcare community. So I think a lot of it is us just coming together as a community to continually raise our voices and make sure that we are heard, and that these companies and these different, whether it's the federal or state level, that patients are continually heard, and that it does take a little more effort, I think, in the rare disease community to make sure that's done. But I think it's really important to continue to raise awareness and make your voice heard.
I couldn't agree more with all of the points that Aaron just said, really. And not to belabor, but just to emphasize that, in the rare disease community, we definitely have to make our voices a little bit louder. And as he said, that there are so many of us with small groups of rare disease communities, but we make up a larger population. And so bringing our voices together and collaborating across these different groups, across advocacy organizations, and with legislators, with multi-stakeholders, it really helps to expand our voices. And so I'd say